Ohio State football is in a somewhat interesting spot right now. Despite making the college football playoff last year, the Buckeyes have now suffered back-to-back losses to the Michigan Wolverines. That is an absolute no-no for Buckeyes fans, and some believe that if Ryan Day loses again, he'll be on the hot seat or could even lose his job. In 2023, Ohio State has got to put it all together. They need to go undefeated, they need to beat Michigan, and in my opinion, they really need to make it to the national championship game. If Ryan Day wants to feel safe, he needs to go ahead and do that. There are some question marks surrounding the team, as some are worried about the offensive line. They'll have to break in a new quarterback, but in today's video, I just want to talk about the 2023 team. We're to go through the hype, talk about their key players, talk about what's new, talk about their schedule, and I'm going to give my thoughts and predictions on this year's team. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what team, player, or topic I could cover in my next one. Now, let's go ahead and get started and talk about Ohio State football. So going back to 2022, there were a few big storylines going into the season. They had brought in Oklahoma State offensive coordinator Jim Knowles to take over that duty. CJ Stroud was expected to be the frontrunner for the Heisman Trophy, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was widely praised as the top receiver in college football. They started out the season ranked number 2 in the country and would have a ginormous matchup in Week 1 against number 5 Notre Dame, who recently hired new head coach Marcus Freeman. This game ended up sort of being a bust, as while Ohio State won 21-10, it never really felt that close. The biggest storyline from that game was the fact that Jackson Smith-Njigba was hurt, and this would have a major effect on the outcome of the season. From there, they'd come home and play Arkansas State in Week 2, where they'd win that game pretty easily, and then destroyed Toledo 77-21. Everything went according to plan so far, and that continued in Week 4 with a dominating victory over Wisconsin, who really fell off last year. After that, they'd take care of Rutgers at home before they went on the road and destroyed Michigan State. Those first 6 games really weren't all that competitive or fun to watch, unless you're an Ohio State fan, and for the most part, that would continue. They'd end up beating Iowa pretty badly before they'd travel to Penn State. For a while, the number 13 Nittany Lions were actually winning that game, and while it was close in the beginning of the fourth quarter, Ohio State eventually pulled away, and JT Tuimoloau had one of the most insane games I've ever seen for a defensive lineman, and Ohio State won 44-31. After that, they'd travel to Northwestern, and bizarrely, they only won 21-7, despite Northwestern going 1-11 last year, and that was just an odd game. They then destroyed Indiana at home before they had their biggest scare of the season. On the road against Maryland, it looked like pull the upset. It was very similar to that 2018 game, but eventually Ohio State figured it out, and their true freshman running back helped pave the way to a victory. They won 43-30 and would stay undefeated for their ginormous matchup with Michigan. Against the number 3 Wolverines, this game was at home, and many expected Ohio State to win big. A lot of people thought Michigan was a pretending team, but it ended up being the opposite. Michigan went into the horseshoe, won 45-23, CJ Stroud dropped to 0-2 against Michigan, and Ohio State fans were left completely speechless. Either way, Ohio State was competitive, and it was a fun game against Georgia. Unfortunately for Buckeyes fans, Stetson Bennett went down the field, threw a game-winning touchdown pass, and Noah Ruggles had an awful kick that lost them the game and sent them home early. It was quite a difficult 2-game stretch for Ohio State fans, as the Buckeyes ended up going 11-2 with an 8-1 record in the Big Ten. The biggest surprise of the season was how good Marvin Harrison Jr. would become. He became arguably the top wide receiver in all of college football as only a true sophomore. Jackson Smith-Njigba barely played, and Travion Henderson also took a step back because of injuries. All in all, Ohio State had a good year, but those last 2 games made Buckeyes fans very upset. And let's go through this roster. So starting our roster preview, let's first take a look at the quarterback spot. It's no secret that Ohio State has recruited really well, as currently they have 3 blue chips on the roster. The first guy that we're going to talk about is Lincoln Kienholz, who will likely redshirt. He's one of the fastest rising quarterbacks in the class of 2023 and flipped from Washington to Ohio State. I personally think he is the future and will take over in 2025, but for now, it's going to come down to Devin Brown and Kyle McCord. Brown was also a late riser, who I think was listed as a 5-star recruit according to On3, but was a consensus 4-star. He'll battle it out with Kyle McCord, who was a consensus 5-star and was a teammate of Marvin Harrison Jr. He is the most experienced, he has that bond with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think he's the most talented out of the two, so I think Kyle McCord will be your guy, and I think he's going to be pretty solid. I'm not sure if he'll be at the same level as Justin Fields or CJ Stroud, but I still think he'll be pretty respectable, and if not, Devin Brown will get his chance. They also apparently have Tristan Gebbia, and you learn something new every day, as I didn't even know that Gebbia transferred there. But he'll just be a good backup and will help lead the young guys. At running back, they have a couple of players, which will include Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson. I think both of those guys will play a lot, and they'll be a great duo like Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins were. They also have Dallin Hayden, who took off towards the end of last season, so overall I really like their running back. At receiver, this is where it gets really fun. Right now, they have 9 guys who should all see the field in some way, shape, or form. It'll be led by Marvin Harrison Jr., who will be the top receiver in the country, and then secondly, you'll have Emeka Egbuka. After that, Julian Fleming should be the third best wideout, and then all of a sudden you have 6 guys fighting for that 4th spot. You'll have Carnell Tate, Noah Rogers, Jaden Ballard, Brandon Innes, Xavier Johnson, and Caleb Brown. I'm not sure if all 6 of those guys will see the field or even last the entire season, but Brian Hartline absolutely loaded up, and the receiver spot will be fine. In terms of the tight end position, they'll return Cade Stover, and I guess G. Scott will slide into that second role. At left tackle, you'll more than likely have Josh Fryer, but you'll also have George Fitzpatrick and true freshman Luke Montgomery behind him. At left guard, they'll return Donovan Jackson, who I think will be great, and then center will be interesting. You'll probably have Carson Hinsman, but Jacob James and Victor Cutler Jr. are also competing at that spot. At right guard, you'll have Matt Jones, and at right tackle, you'll have Tegra Teshabola. Obviously, Ohio State had some attrition on the offensive line, as they had that top 10 pick, and then also lost DeJuan Jones. Right now, in my opinion, that's probably the biggest concern is the offensive line, but if they can put it together and just be halfway decent, then they'll have the skill players in the quarterback and the running backs to do fine. They're also going to have a really good defense. I'm not going to waste your time and bore you with the depth chart on defense, but I'm just going to talk about some of their key players. Currently, their best defender is probably JT Tuimoloau, who's a projected top 10 pick and was at one point the number 1 recruit in his class. He has unlimited potential, and he's my favorite player for Ohio State's defense. After that, you'll have Michael Hall at defensive tackle, Denzel Burke at corner, former 5-star Jack Sawyer at defensive end, Tyleik Williams at defensive tackle, and you'll also return both Tommy Eichenberg and Lathan Ransom at the linebacker and safety spots. There are just so many players on this Ohio State defense that I really like and that are big-time draft prospects, but will they mesh and put it all together? That's the big question. All in all, Ohio State has plenty of talent to run the table and even win a national championship, but will that happen, and what does their schedule look like? Well, let's take a look. When you take a look at Ohio State's schedule, it's pretty interesting. In week 1, they're going to go on the road to play Indiana, and for the most part, this series has never been close. I believe 2015 was a close game, and then 2020 was a close game, but other than that, Ohio State is completely dominated, and that is going to continue. Indiana football is in a tough spot, and this will be an easy week 1 game. In week 2, they'll get Youngstown State, which will be a win, and in week 3, they'll get Western Kentucky, which will be a win. I will say Western Kentucky might put up more points than Ohio State than you think, but it won't be close, and Ohio State will be 3-0. After that is when the first difficult game of the season starts. They're going to go on the road to play Notre Dame. This will be the return game from last year's series, and while I don't think Notre Dame is quite there yet, this could be a very interesting game and could potentially be an upset. Sam Hartman has plenty of experience, Marcus Freeman is seemingly starting to figure it out, and if Notre Dame is as good as advertised, I think they have a chance to at least keep it close and potentially pull off an upset. I still wouldn't put my money on that though, and Ohio State's going to zoom to 4-0. They'll get to 5-0 after a home win over Maryland, who never competes with Ohio State and Columbus. You have the second weird game of the season. The Buckeyes did play Purdue in 2021 at home, but they have not been to Ross-Ade Stadium since the beatdown in 2018. That was quite an interesting matchup. You never know what is going to happen, and it could be closer than Vegas predicts. Still though, Ohio State wins and gets to 6-0. After that, they have a pivotal matchup at home against Penn State. In my opinion, the Nittany Lions are the third best team in the Big Ten East, but I still believe they're a top 5 team. That's how loaded I think the Big Ten East is, as Penn State does typically keep it competitive at the shoe, but I still think Ohio State has the slight edge in this one and will win that one by a touchdown. This will get them to 7-0 before another tricky game against Wisconsin. Wisconsin will be in their first year under head coach Luke Fickell, who guided Cincinnati to the college football playoff. They'll have an experienced quarterback in Tanner Mordecai, an incredible running back in Braylon Allen, and Wisconsin typically has a good defense. This is definitely a trap game in my eyes, and is the third most difficult game on the schedule. All in all though, I still think Ohio State is the better team here, and they're going to win. After that, they go on the road to play Rutgers, which will be over after the first quarter, and then they get Michigan State at home. Even Michigan State's best team in years had an abysmal performance the last time they came to the shoe, and I don't see that changing. Ohio State gets to 10-0. After that, they play Minnesota, who will be in rebuilding mode, before the biggest game in the last few years, a road match against Michigan. Ohio State absolutely has to win this game. If Ryan Day wants to keep his job, and you want to keep Columbus from rioting, you have to go into the big house and win. I think Michigan is going to be really good this year, and I think their only loss coming into it will be against Penn State. But I'm just going to have to go with my gut here, and I don't think Ohio State loses 3 times in a row, and I think the Buckeyes win in a thriller and win close. That would put Ohio State at 12-0, and that would get them to the Big Ten Championship, where they'd play a team like Wisconsin or Purdue or Illinois, and I don't see that being much of an issue for them. That would put them at 13-0 and get them to the college football playoff, and depending on the matchup, I could either see them losing first or winning the whole thing. All in all, I have Ohio State getting to the college football playoff this year. They have a couple more difficult games, as I think Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan aren't exactly going to be easy. I could easily see them losing one of those games, or potentially 2, and it's all going to depend on how that offensive line and how Kyle McCord plays. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but the team goes as far as those 2 positions go. The defense is going to be elite, they have great skill players, and the running back room is stacked. We'll also see how big of an effect it will be losing their offensive coordinator Kevin Wilson to Tulsa, but all in all, Ohio State I think is a college football playoff team, and Ryan Day should get his team back on track, and Ohio State should get back to the bracket. But what do you guys think? What did I get right and wrong? What do you think of this year's Ohio State team, and what's your prediction? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about Cardale Jones and my video previewing Penn State. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.